I strongly recommend Curtis Jackson's book, Hustle Harder and Hustle Smarter. This book was much better than I expected. I went into it not expecting too much, although I was a fan of 50 Cent's music back in the day in high school. I didn't know what to expect when it came to his book, Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter. I didn't know what the book was gonna even be about. I didn't know if it was gonna be a biography. I wasn't too sure. But this book really lives up to its premise. Hustle harder, hustle smarter. I'm gonna tell you guys why everybody should read this book. Have to worry about too many spoilers being in this, but I am just going to give my overall reaction to the book. And it was a fun read and a very informative read. Just the tone of the book, it's casual but very informative. Not full of a bunch of curse words for those that might be concerned about that sort of thing, but 50 Cent is very transparent in his book. The book really isn't too long, which may be a bad thing for some, may be a good thing for others. For me, it's my only criticism of the book because it is filled with gems. And not only does he really stick to his premise of the book, which I love that he really gets to the point in his book. It's not about him diving into things that won't be of value to the average person. He dives into lifestyle advice, he dives into business advice, financial advice, and he does have very specific advice when it comes to certain things. It's not boring by any sense of the word. It's just an interesting book overall, and it's one of those books where when I first started reading it, I was thinking, it's all right, it's cool. I wasn't underwhelmed, I wasn't overwhelmed. I was like, okay, he's talking about his background a bit. It's all right, it's cool. You know, just analyzing it just for what it is. But the more you read, the better it gets. So it's one of those books where by the end of the book, you will say, this was a great book. From the start of the book, you still may not be sure, but the more you read, the better it gets. And like I said, it's a short book, but don't let the length of a book lead you to believe that it's not an amazing book. As we know, The Art of War is damn near a pamphlet, but that is the gospel when it comes to strategy, when it comes to military tactics, when it comes to just being a timeless classic when it comes to books. Much of the book focuses on the mindset, which is something that people undervalue in my opinion. The mindset of a man when it comes to transitioning from the street life. For those that don't know, 50 Cent, Curtis Jackson, he was in the streets heavy from the ages of 12 to 24. But past that age, he was in the corporate world from ages 25 to 44. So he's almost lived twice his life outside of the streets rather than in the streets, making legitimate income. And I strongly recommend this book to the youth, and really to anybody, but primarily to the youth that have come from a rough background, because this is a great underdog story and a true story. He came from a background that most people that come from that background won't be able to make the same transition that he did. But if you listen to the guidance he gives in his book, I guarantee that your odds will be better, because he really breaks down in detail the difference between him and others like him. The people that came from his background that are unsuccessful, versus himself. He speaks to that a lot, and he's very transparent in the book. He talks about the mistakes that he's made throughout his life and the mistakes of business partners that he had detailed knowledge about their mistakes. He gets into that. So there's a lot of information as far as what not to do. And I would also recommend the audiobook version of this. Really easy to listen to it, especially if you're a fan of 50 Cent, because he narrates it himself, which it gives a whole nother vibe to it. And you can really resonate with it even more when you hear it from his own mouth. Gem after gem after gem. Casual, but informative. It's almost like you had the opportunity just to hang out with 50 Cent all day. You just had the opportunity to hang out with him, pick his brain, which he has a brain worthy of picking. Because you can't go from being a dude selling drugs in the streets to being the executive producer of a hit show in the television industry and not have a mind worth picking. Any mind that can do that is worth analyzing. He is much smarter than his perception. I'll definitely put it like that. He is much smarter than his actual perception. His 50 Cent persona would lead people to underestimate his intelligence, but he is actually a very smart man. You learn a lot of interesting facts about Curtis Jackson that you would have never guessed. One thing that I learned from his book was that when he had releases of songs, of new songs, and he would be promoting his music, he would be celebrating some of his achievements while he was still rapping as 50 Cent. I didn't know that he always lived a clean lifestyle. Clean as in no smoking, no drinking, not even coffee. This man was clean. And it's something that you would have never guessed, because there is footage of him out there popping bottles of champagne, celebrating, drinking what would look like alcohol, but in fact, he would have the alcohol poured out and he would replace it with something else, something non-alcoholic. Certain things like that are what the key differences were between him and some of his friends within the industry, some of the people in G Unit that he also was in the industry with. Things like that. The man was really a workaholic. The man promotes working harder than your opponent, outworking them. No one's gonna outwork him was his mindset, which is a beautiful mindset to have, because there is always profit in hard work. And I love the multiple messages within his book, because he does not promote any sort of victim mindset. He does not promote any sort of entitlement. He promotes you working hard. He promotes hard work, because it takes hard work to maintain success. But also, there's solid financial advice in this book. For example, he encourages people to always go for the equity over an upfront payment. Always favor equity over a payday. This man is encouraging long-term investments, long-term investing when it comes to any sort of business venture or even just a job. You always want to go for the ones that provide stock options. He has solid financial advice in his book. And 50 Cent, he proved why it's important to go with the equity over the upfront payment when he made a killing financially with his partnership with Vitamin Water. Before nobody was even thinking much about Vitamin Water, I remember Formula 50. I remember all of that when it first came out. I drank it, but a lot of people, they weren't really into it too much until 50 Cent really started promoting it. And he was promoting it without ever receiving that upfront payment. His payment was equity. Ownership was his payment. And when Coca-Cola got interested in vitamin water, guess who made a massive financial gain when Coca-Cola showed interest in vitamin water? Guess who really came up? Mr. Curtis Jackson did. And like I said, he's very transparent, so he gets into the problems that you have once you become successful, once you go from being a man that's broke to a man that's doing very well financially. He went in detail as far as what problems you will have, especially being a black man coming from his background. He really goes into detail as far as all of the negative things he's experienced due to his success. Unfortunately, success does not always bring all positivity to you. So he gets into that as well. You would think that this man was a student of the 4-Day Laws of Power, which he has read the book. And interestingly enough, him and Robert Greene, the author of the 4-Day Laws of Power, are friends in real life. And they've actually co-authored a book, The 50th Law of Power, which will be my next book. I'll read that. Not sure if I'll do a review on that, but I will definitely check that book out. But interestingly enough, Curtis Jackson, he admits that he really only remembered one law within the 4-Day Laws of Power that always stuck with him, which is to never outshine the master. The first law, which is very interesting. So another reason why I think that this book should be read by everyone is because a person like Robert Greene, a white man, and a man like Curtis Jackson, a black man, how these two can form a friendship when they are from completely different backgrounds in every way. Robert Greene is a history buff. This is a man that stays in a library. If you've ever read the 4-Day Laws of Power, you know there's tons of history in that book. He's a history buff. But him and Robert, once you actually read How to Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter, when you actually read that book and you have more insight into how 50 Cent thinks, how his mind works, you will see why a person like him and Robert Greene would form a friendship in real life. You would see why. This is why I recommend the book to everybody, because everybody can get something from the book Hustle Harder and Hustle Smarter. And it doesn't matter what background you come from. It doesn't matter whether or not you were a fan of the artist 50 Cent. You could be a fan of Curtis Jackson, or at least be a fan of the book, because the book has tons of gems in it. And it's presented in a very casual way, yet still informative and stays on point, sticks to the point. And it's not too long of a read. So if you were someone that liked the 4-Day Laws of Power, you will like 50 Cent's book Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter, because it seems like he's using all these laws. That's what it seems like. That's the impression that I got, that this man knows how to use these laws, which was another interesting thing.